It was a cold and foggy morning. The silence of the deserted road was broken only by the occasional sound of cars speeding by. On the shoulder, amidst pieces of trash and dry leaves, a skinny, scruffy dog stood still. His brown eyes shone with a mix of fear and sadness as he stared in the direction where the last car had disappeared. An old collar hung around his neck, worn as if it had been hastily removed at some point. A truck sped past, kicking up dust and almost hitting him, but he didn't move. His body trembled, not just from the cold but from the abandonment he seemed to feel. In the distance, the sound of footsteps approached, but the dog simply lowered his head, resigned, as if he already knew what awaited him. This was just the beginning of a story no one could have predicted. Days earlier, this dog, who would later be called Valenti Brave, had a home. He had been the loyal companion of a family, always wagging his tail with joy at the sight of them. But over time, the joy gave way to indifference. His owners were facing financial difficulties and, in a moment of desperation, decided they could no longer care for him. On that fateful morning, Valenti was placed in the car for what he thought was a fun outing. He wagged his tail, happy to be with his family. But when they reached the deserted road, the car stopped. Confused, he was left there. The car door closed, and the sound of the engine fading away echoed in his ears. He ran after the vehicle, but couldn't keep up. Since then, Valenti had stayed in that same spot, as if waiting for them to return. He barely ate, surviving on scraps found along the roadside. His body grew weaker, but his determination to wait remained unshaken. One afternoon, a violent storm swept through the region. Lightning streaked across the sky, and rain poured down in sheets. Valenti sought shelter under a nearby bridge, trembling from the cold. He was exhausted, hungry, and weak, but something in his eyes showed he wasn't ready to give up. During the storm, a cyclist named Marcello passed by on the road and saw the dog. Concerned by the sight, he immediately stopped. Approaching cautiously, he tried to offer food, but Valenti growled softly, still wary. It was as if he refused to leave his post, clinging to the hope that his family would come back. Marcello didn't give up. He returned the next day with more food and tried again to approach. This time, Valenti accepted the food, but still seemed distant, trapped in his own suffering. Marcello realized that this wasn't just a lost dog. It was a being waiting for something or someone who would never return. Marcello decided he couldn't leave him there. He placed a blanket on the ground and patiently waited for Valenti to trust him. Days passed before the dog finally allowed Marcello to get close enough to touch him. It was a moment of pure emotion when Valenti, with his tired eyes, rested his head in Marcello's hands, as if finally accepting that he needed help. But on the way to the shelter, something unexpected happened. Marcello stopped at a gas station to rest, and Valenti, realizing he was being taken away, jumped out of the car. He ran back to the spot where he had been abandoned, as if his mission there wasn't finished. Marcello panicked, running after him. When he finally found Valenti, the dog was frantically digging in a corner of the roadside. Beneath the dirt, something was hidden that would change everything. When Marcello reached the spot, he saw Valenti unearthing a piece of cloth. Inside it was an old, chewed-up toy, his favorite toy that he used to carry around the house. Even after being abandoned, Valenti hadn't forgotten his previous life. He had kept that memory as a connection to his past, a symbol of the love he still believed in. Marcello dropped to his knees beside Valenti, tears streaming down his face. He promised the dog that he would never abandon him again. Valenti, in turn, finally allowed himself to be taken away, as if he understood that love was once again within his reach. Marcello took Valenti home, cared for him, and gave him a new life. Over time, the dog grew more confident and full of life, but he never parted with his toy, which had become a symbol of his resilience. Valenti teaches us about the strength of love and resilience. Even when the world seemed to have given up on him, he never lost hope. His story reminds us that everyone deserves a second chance, and that sometimes all we need is someone willing to believe in us. Today, Valenti is not just a rescued dog, he is a symbol of triumph, showing that even in the darkest situations, love can change everything. And so, the dog who was left on the side of the road found a happy ending, but only because someone chose not to give up on him.